One quiet night in the living room erased the invisible line between us, reshaping everything with just one touch. Growing up, my younger brother Luke was always by my side, tagging along no matter where I went. He was the typical little brother, always curious, always wanting to be included, even as we grew older. When most siblings drifted apart, he stayed close. Perhaps it was the constant chaos of our family. Sticking together felt like the only way to make it through. But lately, things felt different. Luke had changed. It wasn't something I could put my finger on easily. It was more like a series of small, fleeting moments that seemed too subtle to call out. His jokes weren't quite the same. His glances seemed to linger, and his presence felt heavier. Somehow, it was as if a stranger had quietly stepped into the shoes of my little brother. Though I couldn't say why that evening, with our parents away on a weekend trip, it was just the two of us. The house was unusually silent, and a storm outside only made the silence feel more intense. I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when Luke came in with 2 cups of tea. "Thought you might want one," he said, handing it to me with a soft smile. I took it, smiling back, though I could feel that strange tension again. "Thanks, Luke," I replied, trying to keep things casual, as if the strange air between us wasn't there. He sat beside me a little closer than usual, the cushion sinking slightly under his weight. We made small talk for a while about things that didn't really matter. The weather, a new movie he'd watched, funny stories from school. But underneath it, I could sense something unspoken, something hanging between us that I couldn't quite put a name to. I tried to laugh it off, blaming my overactive imagination. But I knew that wouldn't shake the feeling. "Remember that summer we spent at the lake house?" he asked suddenly, his voice low. "Yeah," I replied, smiling. "How could I forget? You practically lived in the water." Luke chuckled, his eyes warm with the memory. "I remember you were so patient with me, teaching me how to swim, even though I was terrible at it." I laughed. "You were terrible, but hey, I loved it." It was one of my favorite summers. The silence that followed was heavy. Luke looked at me, his gaze softer than I was used to. His hand rested on the couch, just a bit closer to mine than I expected, his fingers brushing mine lightly as he shifted for a moment. I felt the air around us thicken, my heart beat faster, and I wasn't sure why. This was Luke, my little brother, the kid I'd taught how to swim, who had pestered me with a million questions growing up, but sitting there with him, his eyes locked on mine. I felt something I couldn't quite name. "Do you ever think about how things might have been if we didn't have all the chaos?" He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I glanced down, not sure how to respond. Our family was complicated, to say the least. We'd had our fair share of turmoil, arguments, broken promises, nights spent hoping things would change. It had made us close in ways most siblings weren't. But I wondered now if maybe we were too close. Sometimes, I admitted, looking away, my gaze settling on the window where raindrops traced lines down the glass. But it's not something we can change, right? All we can do is live with it. "Yeah," he replied, though there was a strange sadness in his voice, "but sometimes I wish it could be different." I turned back to him, surprised. His eyes were dark, thoughtful, filled with something I didn't quite recognize. A soft flash of lightning illuminated the room for a second, and I noticed the way his hand was now just barely touching mine, his fingers lightly grazing my knuckles. I pulled my hand back instinctively, forcing a laugh. To one quiet night in the living room erased the invisible line between us, reshaping everything with just one touch. Growing up, my younger brother Luke was always by my side, tagging along no matter where I went. He was the typical little brother, always curious, always wanting to be included. Even as we grew older, when most siblings drifted apart, he stayed close, perhaps. It was the constant chaos of our family sticking together felt like the only way to make it through. But lately, things felt different. Luke had changed. It wasn't something I could put my finger on easily. It was more like a series of small, fleeting moments that seemed too subtle to call out. His jokes weren't quite the same. His glances seemed to linger, and his presence felt heavier. Somehow, it was as if a stranger had quietly stepped into the shoes of my little brother. Though I couldn't say why that evening, with our parents away on a weekend trip, it was just the two of us. The house was unusually silent, and a storm outside only made the silence feel more intense. I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone when Luke came in with 2 cups of tea. "Thought you might want one," he said, handing it to me with a soft smile. To say something, anything to ease the tension, but the words caught in my throat. Without thinking, I reached out, placing my hand on his. It was a small gesture, but it felt like crossing a line, a boundary we'd never questioned before. His fingers tightened around mine, and for a moment we sat there in silence. Our hands entwined the world around us. Fading away, I could feel the heat of his skin, the gentle pressure of his hand holding mine, and it felt safe. And yet, it was a kind of safety that felt dangerous, a strange contradiction I couldn't quite understand. "I don't know what to do," he murmured, his voice filled with a vulnerability I'd never seen before. I looked at him, my heart racing the air between us, charged with an energy I couldn't ignore. "Neither do I." Our gazes locked, and for a moment everything else fell away. The rules, the expectations, the voices in our heads telling us this wasn't right. All that remained was the quiet understanding between us, the realization that something had changed, something we couldn't take back that evening. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying our conversation over and over in my mind. Every word, every glance, every touch felt etched into my memory, each one pulling me deeper into a place I knew I shouldn't go. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself to let it go, the pull was too strong, too overwhelming to ignore. The next morning I tried to keep things normal. I got up, went through my usual routine, keeping my thoughts tightly controlled, determined to put everything back in its place. But when I walked into the kitchen, there was Luke standing by the counter, his expression tense. He looked at me, his gaze searching as if he was trying to read my mind to see if I was feeling the same unbearable weight pressing down on me. I forced myself to smile, to pretend like everything was fine, but he didn't return it. "Are you avoiding me?" he asked, his voice steady, but his eyes full of uncertainty. I hesitated, caught off guard by his directness. "No, I don't know what to say." His shoulders slumped slightly, and he nodded, looking away. "I get it. It's complicated." The word hung in the air between us, inadequate to describe the mess we were in. I wanted to tell him that I felt the same way, that I was just as confused, just as lost. But saying it aloud would make it real, and I wasn't ready for that. As the days passed, the tension only grew. Every moment we spent together felt charged, like a tightly wound spring ready to snap. I could feel his presence in every room, every glance, every accidental brush of his hand against mine. And with each passing day, it became harder and harder to pretend that nothing was happening. One evening after dinner, we found ourselves alone in the living room. Our parents were out again, leaving us in the familiar silence that had grown heavy with unspoken words. I sat on the couch, my eyes fixed on the TV, though I wasn't really watching. Luke sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, his presence overwhelming the silence stretched between us each second, amplifying the tension until it felt unbearable. I could feel my heart racing, my hands trembling slightly as I fought the urge to look at him, to say something, anything to break the silence. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't keep pretending, you know." I turned to him, startled, my breath catching in my throat. He was looking at me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and longing that mirrored my own. "Me neither," I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. He reached out his hand, brushing mine, the touch sending a shiver down my spine. We sat there, frozen in that moment, our hands barely touching, but the connection between us feeling stronger than anything I'd ever known. For a moment, I wanted to pull away, to break the spell that had wrapped around us. But something in his gaze held me in place, a silent plea that I couldn't ignore. I felt my resolve weaken, the walls I'd built around myself crumbling, as I let myself lean closer, just enough to feel his breath against my skin. "I don't know how to stop this," he murmured, his voice filled with a vulnerability that made my heart ache. I looked at him, my pulse racing, every nerve in my body alive, with a tension that felt both terrifying and thrilling. Maybe we don't have to." The words hung in the air between us, a tentative offer, a step into the unknown. I could see the hesitation in his eyes, the conflict. But there was something else, too. A spark, a quiet determination that made my heart race. He reached out his fingers, brushing my cheek, his touch so gentle it felt like a whisper. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand, the soft brush of, admitted my voice, barely audible. "But I didn't think you felt the same." He opened his eyes, his gaze intense, filled with a quiet determination. "I've tried to hide it, to pretend it wasn't there, but I can't anymore." "I don't want to pretend." His words sent a thrill through me, a quiet affirmation of everything I'd been feeling, the emotions I'd been trying to deny. I felt myself smile, a soft, almost shy smile, as I looked at him, my hand resting on his cheek, my heart filled with a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. He leaned in again, his lips finding mine, the kiss deeper this time, filled with a quiet urgency, a need that neither of us could deny. His hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer, and I felt myself melting into him, into the moment, into the feeling of being completely and utterly consumed by him. It was as if the universe condensed to this singular moment, the world outside rules and expectations dissolving into insignificance. All that existed was the gentle pressure of his touch, the warmth of his gaze, and the profound sense of being seen, understood, and cherished. His hand traced the curve of my back, sending shivers down my spine. I instinctively drew closer, my fingers intertwining with his, our bodies swaying in perfect harmony. Time lost all meaning as we surrendered to the intensity of the moment. Our heartbeats synchronized, a soothing melody that resonated deep within. I felt the rush of emotions, the thrill of connection, and the security of being enveloped in his presence. In this fleeting instant, we were unstoppable, untethered and unguarded. Our connection transcended words, a symphony of emotions playing in perfect sync. The closeness was exhilarating, yet terrifying, like standing on the precipice of a new dawn. Yet in his arms I found solace, a sense of belonging that defied explanation when we finally pulled back. Breathing heavily, he looked at me, his gaze filled with a mixture of wonder and awe, as if he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. "I don't know where this is going," He admitted his voice barely more than a whisper. "But I don't want to stop. I don't want to go back." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of certainty settle over me. "Neither do I." We sat there in the quiet, our hands still intertwined, a sense of peace filling the room. A quiet assurance that no matter what came next, we would face it together. It was a feeling that was both comforting and terrifying, a realization that this was something we couldn't ignore, couldn't run from the silence stretched on comfortable and filled with unspoken promises. I felt his thumb brush over my knuckles, a small, tender gesture that made my heart ache with a quiet joy. It was as if, in that moment, everything else faded away, leaving only the two of us caught in a world of our own making. As the night wore on, we stayed close, our quiet whispers filling the darkness, a silent conversation of shared glances and gentle touches, each one deepening the bond between us, each one pulling us closer. It was a closeness that felt both new and familiar, a connection that had been waiting in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to come to life. And now there was no turning back. The days that followed felt like a blur, filled with stolen moments, quiet conversations, and a connection that seemed to grow stronger with every shared glance. Luke and I moved around other, with a new understanding, an unspoken promise that neither of us had to voice aloud. It was as if a door had opened between us, leading to a place we'd never dared to imagine, a place that felt forbidden and yet strangely right. Each day we found ourselves drawn to each other in ways that were hard to ignore, passing each other in the hallway, a brush of hands in the kitchen, a lingering look that seemed to say everything we couldn't put into words. I felt my heart race whenever he was near, a feeling that was both exhilarating and terrifying. A reminder of how much had changed between us. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow, through the windows, I found myself sitting with Luke in the backyard, watching as the world grew quiet. The air was cool, and a soft breeze stirred the leaves, filling the silence with a gentle rustling that somehow made the moment feel even more intimate. Luke glanced over at me, his expression soft, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I never thought we'd be here," he murmured, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Neither did I replied, a sense of wonder filling me, but I don't regret it." He reached out his hand, finding mine, his fingers warm and steady me. Neither for a while we sat there, hand in hand, watching as the sky darkened, stars beginning to appear one by one. It felt like we were in a world of our own, a place untouched by reality, where nothing else mattered but the quiet connection between us. It was a peace I hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of belong, intertwined, a shared understanding that this was a moment we would both carry with us, a memory that would remain even if the world around us moved on. As I looked at him, a tear slipped down my cheek, a quiet acknowledgement of the loss of the ending that we both knew was inevitable. He reached up, wiping the tear away. His touch, gentle, a final act of tenderness that felt like a goodbye. In the days that followed, we slowly drifted apart, a quiet distance settling between us, a space filled with the echoes of everything we'd shared. We went back to our routines, our lives, intertwining in quieter, subtler ways. As siblings, as friends, as two people who had shared something that would never be spoken of again. But even as we returned to the roles the world expected of us, I knew that what we had was something rare, something that had changed me in ways I couldn't fully understand. And though we did speak of it, I could feel that he carried it with him too. A quiet reminder of a time when we'd let our hearts lead, even if only for a fleeting moment. In the years that followed, our lives took us in different directions, paths that diverged, yet always seemed to lead back to each other. There was a comfort in knowing that he was there, a steady presence, a quiet assurance that no matter what, we'd always have that unspoken bond. And though the memory of those days faded over time, growing softer, quieter, it remained a part of me, a quiet echo that reminded me of the person I'd been, of the love we'd shared. However briefly, some things I realized are meant to be treasured, quietly carried in the heart, like a secret, a memory that only grows more precious with time, and though life moved on carrying us with it, that part of my heart would always be his. A quiet corner that no one else would ever touch. We never spoke of it again. It became our silent understanding, our shared history, a chapter that would remain forever. Ours locked away in the quiet spaces of memory. And though our lives had moved forward through the years, had changed us, I knew that he would always be a part of me, as I was a part of him. It was a love that needed no words, no explanations, just the quiet certainty that we had been there, that we had loved, even if only in the silence of